Hi there. I'm going to talk in this video about one of my favourite singer-songwriters, Townes Van Zandt. I kind of chosen him partly because I think he's one of the great lyricists, and maybe one of the things that's important in our music is the lyrics, and that's one of my main roles in the band. So I always like to emphasise the lyrics. Townes Van Zandt was a Texan singer-songwriter who died only aged 52 in 1997. And I remember that year because he died in January 97, and I happened to see his last concert, which was in London in December 96, which I'll kind of talk about in a little bit. But Townes Van Zandt was a songwriter, so the music and the words are equally important. But I guess he's particularly elevated in terms of his ability with language, and he has a kind of concision and a surprising quality in his words. There's one line that starts, "Won't you lend your lungs to me? Mine are collapsing." It kind of arrests you and kind of shocks and surprises you. Just to put a bit of context, he was from a wealthy Texan family. He struggled with mental health during his life. He was catastrophically hospitalized because of the treatment he was given age 20, an approach called insulin shock treatment, where basically insulin was pumped into the body to provoke a coma. And the basic effect of it was it erased much of his memory. And this idea of not being able to remember his childhood and his early experience, I think, sort of figures in the music, where there's a sense of somebody maybe with something missing, some sense of erasure, some sense of irredeemable loss in some of the songs. And there is a heaviness in quite a few of his songs, which maybe I'm going to talk about a couple of songs on the heavier side, maybe. But he was a real performer as well, and he started in a nightclub in Houston called The Jester, where he was the kind of house performer. And through that, he got to meet lots of different other musicians, including Lightning Hopkins, the blues artist, who influenced his guitar playing and I think became a friend. I guess the genre or the kind of music maybe you'd categorize more as folk, although there are elements of blues and country. But there's a real kind of poetic quality to his songwriting. There's rarely a wasted word. There's a kind of, they're not self-consciously poetic, but they are what Wordsworth would have called maybe lyrical ballads, some of them. And there are affinities with poets as well as songwriters, and that's one of the things I love about him. I kind of revisited Townes Van Zandt partly because of I've been reading Bob Dylan, or some of Bob Dylan's book, The Philosophy of Modern Song, which is a slightly crazy take on some of the songs, these sort of almost stream of consciousness or accounts of the songs and the context, some of which are fantastic, poetic, some of which seem a bit bizarre, both in a good and a bad way. But anyway, he chose to write about one of probably Townes Van Zandt's most famous song, Pancho and Lefty. And he gives a very concise and beautiful account of Townes by saying, diagnosed with manic depression, Townes was shocked with both electricity and massive dosages of insulin. The treatments destroyed portions of his memories, which most likely is what gives his songs such a skeletal, detached feel. And I think that captures certainly the quality to quite a lot of his songs, one of which I think I'm going to be coming back to. But in terms of Pancho and Lefty, it's a kind of ballad, 4 verses. It's ostensibly about these two characters, Pancho and Lefty. Pancho is a kind of revolutionary, rather romanticized bandit, and Lefty was his sidekick, who survives him and is a musician. It's an interesting song. It's kind of a story song where actually most of the action is sort of off camera. And in the 4 verses, in the second verse, the first time you hear about Pancho, he actually, he's met his match, he dies, he's shot by the federales, the lawmen. So in a way, one thing Townes said about the song is, one thing I know about the song is it's not about Pancho, which is quite funny. Between the lines, there's a sense that the reason that Lefty survived is because he betrayed Pancho. He took some money. It's not explicitly said, but inferred. And so the idea is he survives, but in a compromised way, and he ends up in a cheap hotel. So now the poets tell how Pancho fell. Lefty's living in a cheap hotel. The desert's quiet and Cleveland's cold, so the story ends, we're told. And there's this refrain throughout it, which is along the lines of the federales could have caught Pancho at any time, but they let him go out of kindness, I suppose, with kind of heavy irony. What I like about a song like this is that it tells a story, but the story is, like I say, a bit off-center. And the first verse, it arrests you, it kind of takes you in. It says, living on the road, my friend, was going to keep you free and clean. Now you wear your skin like iron and your breath's as hard as kerosene. You weren't your mama's only boy, but a favourite one it seems. You began to cry when you said goodbye, sank into your dreams. Now in Dylan's account, he's assuming, or he kind of infers that the singer is talking about Pancho. And other accounts have talked about, maybe it's about Lefty, because it's about kind of disenchantment in a way. The idea of living on the road, being free, and then you become kind of reduced and hardened. I think it reminds me of the Dylan line, to live outside the law, you must be honest. And that's a sort of something, maybe a subtext or something in this song. But I see that first verse as maybe actually the singer talking to himself, living on the road. And so it's a song maybe, as well as the story, about the singer. I think in some of Townes Van Zandt's songs, the characters are a bit like you'd encounter in a dream, where you might see the characters, they might have the names and faces of other people, but they might represent part of yourself. Obviously, I did a longer video, and I can't do justice to a singer and the range of his songs, in a short video. So I kind of wanted to talk about one other song, I think, called Nothing, and it's a very bleak song, and it's this paradox of a song about nothing, and how can you sing about nothing? And I think he uses the word nothing about 5 times. I've just replicated that in my account. It starts, hey mama, when you leave, don't leave a thing behind. I don't want nothing, I can't use nothing. Take care into the hall, and if you see my friends, tell them I'm fine, not using nothing. Then it goes on, almost burnt out my eyes and threw my ears down to the floor. I didn't see nothing, I didn't hear nothing. I stood there like a block of stone, knowing all I had to know, and nothing more. Man, that's nothing. And then there's this image of these troubles being brothers who are locked in each other's arms, and the idea of not being strong enough for the burden of life. And then the only verse, the 4th verse, that doesn't use the word nothing, kind of it's imminent in the meaning, even though he doesn't use the word. Being born is going blind and bowing down 1,000 times to echoes strung on pure temptation. Sorrow and solitude, these are the precious things, and the only words that are worth remembering. So a bleak song and a desolate song. And for some people, maybe some of his songs and music would be kind of off-putting in that way. But I think maybe I've not suffered to the extent that Townes Van Zandt suffered from alcoholism and mental health difficulties and to his extent, and heroin use, and he had this duality in his life and in his songs, to which was, I think, described probably in terms of almost being bipolar, where he would have these periods of retreating and living on his own in isolation, and then this idea of immersion in rather manic kind of life, which he described as sort of an unhealthy life and a form of excess that caused him and others a lot of harm. But this sort of sense of nothingness and nothing being able to redeem you, the kind of level of bleakness, I think there's something in putting that feeling into words that has value, that kind of, for me, when I first heard it, helped me when I was feeling troubled and lost myself. And I think apparently there are a lot of people who wrote Townes. Not, he's not got millions of fans, but the people who got into him used to write him letters and about almost like, "You've saved my life." And I think that's the thing about great writers. It's not a peripheral thing. It's a life and death kind of thing. And Townes Van Zandt is really worth exploring if you're kind of interested in this kind of music. I think I kind of wanted to highlight him because although he's been called the songwriter's songwriter, and he's got sort of some big fans, including Dylan and Steve Earle and various other people, he's not that widely known. And he probably, in my view, he's probably best heard in the simplest form that you can get, which is him playing on his own. And there's this great double album called Live at the Old Quarter, Houston, Texas, which I recommend, which has got about, I don't know, 22 or something of his great songs recorded in 1973. Some of the studio albums, particularly the early ones, are slight mismatch in terms of the arrangements, rather oversweet for these powerful songs. I could go on all night, but all I really wanted to convey was some of the qualities of him as a writer. And I think there is something poetic. I think the combination of music and lyrics in that song, Nothing, it reminded me of Gerard Manley Hopkins, the poet, late 19th century, when he wrote about the extremity of suffering. "Oh, the mind has mountains, cliffs of fall, frightful sheer, no man fathomed. Hold them cheap, may, who ne'er hung there." And I think Townes Van Zandt was somebody who was on those mountains and felt the frightfulness of it and managed somehow to convey something in song. And that's my memory, my last memory of Townes Van Zandt. I managed to see him 3 times. I'm very fortunate. But I saw him in his final concert where he was evidently very unwell. I assume he'd relapsed and was on alcohol. And he was trembling so much he couldn't play his guitar at certain points. And it looked like, a bit like if you've seen those films of Judy Garland in her last performances, it felt like it could just fall apart at any time. And at one point he kind of lifted his leg and he kind of banged it down on the floor. And it somehow kind of locked him into these songs where he seemed to at least momentarily find himself. So I guess that's what I wanted to convey. The song about life and death. And they're that important, some of his songs, for all the lightness in other performances and so on. That's the thing that kind of really resonates with me. So anyway, if you like the sound of him, or maybe you've heard him before and this video might have raised your interest again, yeah, check him out. There's we'll put a written little account with this, where there's a link with an interview that he did in 1993, I think, which is really interesting. And there's loads of performances, things that you can stream, and then maybe one day you'll track down some of these wonderful records. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed listening, and stay happy and well. Bye.